Good morning, everyone. My name is Axel Pierreur. I think most of you I have met already in the past and even recently. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this data governance webinar that we organized together with our partner NodeGraph. This webinar will last 1 hour, so we should be finished at 12 o'clock for our lunch. And it would be in English, since our friends from NodeGraph are from Sweden. You will maybe not notice it because we don't see the snow yet, but they are indeed from Sweden. What is the agenda of this webinar? First of all, I will make a short introduction, a few minutes, and then the most important part will be dedicated to NodeGraph, and we will have two speakers. First of all, Carl Anderson, who is Director of Business Development, and he will explain us the data governance strategy of NodeGraph. And then we will go into the practical aspect with a demo from Oscar Grondal, who is the CEO and founder of NodeGraph. And we have reserved 10 to 15 minutes to the Q&A to let you ask all the questions you might have. So why do we speak about data governance in a business intelligence application? Well, there are many reasons. Here I will put some questions that either business people or technical people might have around data governance in their BI application. The first one is when you have a KPI, you want to know which data is used for this KPI. If you use the same KPI in different applications, how can you be sure as a business user that these KPI use the same data to be calculated into those two applications? If you're on the technical part and you are fed up with updating your documentation each time that you do a change in your data flow, how could you have a documentation that is updated automatically and perfectly updated? If you change something in the data source, or if you change something in the transformation layer, how can you make sure what are the impacts that it may have in the following layers? And that is very important. Does it impact just one application? Does it impact many others' application? You should be able to see it very easily after the impact is done. And also, if you are in the personal data, if you use personal data in your business application, you must probably generate some compliance reports. So how can you automate the generation of these reports to make sure that only the specific person may access the personal data? And there are many other questions, like how can I automate testing? That is also part of the data governance to make sure that you have the correct results. So data governance can be very broad, and that's the reason why we work with NodeGraph since several years, and they have a fantastic solution to cover all these questions, both for the business users and the technical users, from the data sources to the published applications that you deliver to your internal or external users. So I will now give the word to NodeGraph. Carl, I give you the word, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Axel. So let's see. Now I start with the first task here, and that is to share my screen. Let's see if I can do that. And yes, it seems like I can. Awesome. And thank you very much, Axel, for the introduction. What we plan to show and discuss with all of you in this webinar today is to look at data governance and see it from our perspective. Oscar will talk a little bit more about, the importance of this and how to build the foundations and so on. And I will just give an introduction to us as a company, where we come from and what we have been doing so far. As Axel mentioned, data governance is a rising topic. It's always been there, but now It's been more and more. We see a lot of reports from Gartner. We see a lot of other types of industry movements in all of it. But NodeGraph as a company, I mean, we're a global vendor in data and analytics governance. We are a Swedish company with a lot of click heritage, and we have offices in Europe and North America, and we work a lot with partners. So we are covering roughly 25 countries via the partner network. Partners just as Kozalys. If we look at our installed base, we have roughly 300 installations, and those are, I would say, from very much different sectors. I would say government, finance, banking, fintech, pharma is something that where we see a very strong movement and a very strong demand for the questions and the types of challenges we can solve. We have been a click-only company for quite a while. And since last year, we have now started to add other types of visualization and BI tools in order to expand and also in order to serve our customers even better. So now we also do a lot of the analytics side, but we also have capabilities in the data warehouses, databases, and so on. And if we look at, if I have been given the task to just say, what are the customers asking us and why do they approach us and so on? And that is very much related to what Axel just mentioned. What KPI is there? How is the data feed going? If I have multiple KPIs, how can I make sure that all the data is correct and updated and so on? GDPR is also something that's a very, very hot topic from a compliance perspective. But just to boil it down, companies today that we work with, they start with the question, where does their data come from? They get requests either from the data consumers or they get requests from auditors or wherever it can be. That's a very, very much a hot topic among our customers. And then that also relates into the trust of data. So we're talking a lot about utilization of BI reports and so on. And in order to get on high utilization of that, you need to make sure that the data consumer actually trusts it, because first off, that they trust the data, they can actually act upon it. Everything boils down, which for us means, well, if you have good governed data, both data and analytics, that means that you are in control of data. So you should never worry about, well, let's say we get an audit on a GDPR compliance. If you have good control of your data, that shouldn't be any problem, so to say. The approach we are using is metadata. And why metadata is so beautiful, and that is because the metadata is already there among all your other data. And we see to utilize and to sort of say get some way of using already prepared data is something that makes a NodeGraph installation scalable very, very quickly. Often it starts with a smaller project, but then they see that it's so easy to scale that you can very easily expand your NodeGraph implementation. And what we do is that we understand metadata, we can interpret metadata. Interpret metadata is quite important because that's where we differ among our competitors as well, especially on the data lineage side, where, so to say, we take metadata, we put it in our engine, in our platform, and then we can produce all of this beautiful lineage and all that control of data. And we also work with an interface that's user-friendly. It's easy to understand and it's modern. The keywords we do have at NodeGraph and what we want to sort of say offer to the world is to discover data, trust your data, and then decide upon the data. Now, Oscar, this was the introduction from my side.
Perfect. Thank you, Carl.
Yeah, no worries. So now I not go offline, but I go off stage.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. My name is Oscar. I'm the CEO and founder here at NodeGraph. If you think I'm a bit slow, it's because we actually have really cold weather in Sweden right now. Super cold. So my brain is really slow. But hopefully you will enjoy my demo today. Before I take off with the demo, I just want to tell you the story behind why we actually started the company NodeGraph. So I work myself as an enterprise architect for BI, and specific click environments, right? So what happened with a BI environment, regardless if it's Click, Power BI, or Tableau, or any other BI tool, is, and especially the modern BI tools, is that typically the initiative around BI starts from the business side. So they realize we have a problem. We don't know how much we sell in this region, or we don't know how many patients we have in this hospital, or we don't know this data. So what happens is that they go to IT. They think that IT don't deliver fast enough, so they go out in the market and try to find a solution for the problem, right? So they find a product. And very often the product is called Click, which is a fantastic tool. And they start building a report or an application around the certain problem that they have. And considering that Click is a very powerful tool, they will be very successful in building this report. So they feel that, all right, we solved this problem. Now we know how many patients we have in this hospital. Well, now we know how much sales we have in this country. Perfect. But now we have this new problem. We would like to know this as well. So they start building the next report. And then they start building the next report. And then they start building the next report, because they are so successful when the BI tool can deliver insights so fast. So what we saw, and what we saw back in days working with BI, is that what happens is that this small environment that started in a departmental way with only maybe 1, 2, 3 applications, all of a sudden you have 500 applications or reports. Maybe you have 5 important KPIs in these 500 applications in each of them. And then all of a sudden we have tons of KPIs. But then the next question comes up, because now you have been working with this data for maybe 3 to 5, 6, 7 years. You start, questioning, where does the data come from in this application? How do we actually calculate this KPI? So now we end up in this whole governance question. That wasn't really a question from the start. We started with one application, we got really quick insight, everything was doing so good, and we were moving so fast. But governance is about trusting the data, understanding the data, and feel comfortable in the data that you provide. And this is what we saw back in the days. And we started looking in the market to find a product that can actually solve this problem. And there are other tools out there. NodeGraph is not the only solution out there. But one important thing that we also found is that the governance side needs to be able to move as fast as the BI side. If you have a discrepancy there, where governance is slowing down the BI side, you will not work with the governance. Meaning that, again, you will ask questions like, where does the data come from? Can I trust the data? And once your users start having doubts around the data, then you have a problem, because then they will start doubting your BI solution. They will start having questions around the data that you provide. And the problem that they will see is to go to the market and try to find a new product, because they think actually maybe Click is the problem now. But Click is not the problem. The problem is that you don't have good governance. So you need to have a governance tool that can provide governance in an automated way. So automation is key. And that's what we couldn't find in the market back then. All the other tools out there, depending on manual inputs, we needed to manually update something to have good governance. So therefore, we came up with NodeGraph, which is an automated way to build great governance around your BI tool. I also, before I take off in the demo as well, I want to elaborate a bit on data governance versus analytics governance, because governance is not a new thing. If you look at the data warehouse side or the data prep side, governance has been there for a very long time. They know the importance of understanding where the data is coming from, how we calculate data, and all of these things. And also the data quality side, like Alex mentioned before, testing the data. But the reason why we don't have governance on the analytics side historically is two reasons, I think. One is that because it's been driven from the business side. And the business side has been focusing on solving the problems that they have, answering the question, how much sales, how many patients do we have? And they haven't really seen the need for the governance until now, where they now have a big BI landscape that they need to be in control of. And the other reason is that if you look from an IT perspective, historically, there have been, the IT side has seen this governance side as something that was only needed in the data warehouse. Because after the data warehouse, you should not do any changes to the data, right? When we deliver a KPI from the data warehouse, you should only consume that. You should don't change that. But what happened with the modern BI tool is that they are super strong in transforming data, but also bringing in new data from other sources that you don't even have in the data warehouse. On top of that, the modern BI tool also allows to calculate data in the UI. So you can take different KPIs that they deliver from the data warehouse and calculate new KPIs in the UI of the BI tool. So, but I think the IT side has been a bit slow to understand that, oh, people are actually altering or changing the KPI that we are delivering from the data warehouse. So they haven't historically seen the need of having governance over the BI side, but that has changed now. So, and that's also something that I think companies like Gartner also try to highlight now, that you need to have not only data governance, but analytics governance. And that's where we are, NodeGraph comes in. We bring automated analytics governance on top of your BI solution. So with that said, I'm gonna start showing our product as well. Let me share my screen. I want to encourage you now, we have this webinar today, which is more or less a monologue from a crazy Swede on this side. So feel free to use the questions function that you have in the platform here at Livestorm. There we go. So now you should be able to see my screen. So as I said, NodeGraph is an automated platform. It works with Qlik, Power BI, Tableau. It works with Snowflake, SQL. So a lot of different connectors around there. But the key is that everything you see has been pulled together in an automated way. So automation is key. We have two separate tracks in NodeGraph. We have Data Atlas, which is focusing on the metadata, the lineage, impact analysis. We also have automated documentation, which is also a very interesting thing, because when it comes to BI tool, for some reason, the documentation is very difficult to keep up to speed with, right? Because we are developing so fast, so we don't even have time to document what we are doing. And that's also one reason why you should have an automated governance platform on top of that that can do that in an automated way. But that's the Data Atlas. We also have the Data Quality Manager. Data Quality Manager we will not talk so much about today, but that's about testing your data. You can, for example, validate in your Qlik Sense application. If I make this selection, I select this salesperson, I select this year, then I expect this master item to always be 17 million. That should never change. So regression testing. Or you can, for example, validate data that you have in your QED against data that you have in your database, making sure that we don't create any corrupt data, or maybe a simple test, is the data up to date? There are still a lot of organizations out there that have problem with having the data up to date at the right time, which again, makes the user a bit hesitant around BI. So data quality is super important. But today we'll focus on the Data Atlas side. So before we start off, I just want to show you what a classic Qlik installation can look like. In best case scenarios, you have a good deployment framework, meaning that you have very good naming around how you develop your Qlik product. But again, even though we know where our Qlik data is, where we can find it, it's still very difficult to understand how it's all connected. We can see that we have Qlik files, we have Excel files, we have QVDs, and all of these things. Very difficult to understand how the data is connected, where the data is coming from. So this is what we automatically connect to and give you this picture instead. So we draw this data journey for you in this platform. So on your right-hand side, I'm just gonna remove that one. On your right-hand side, we have your reports, applications, regardless if it's Qlik, Power BI, Tableau, QlikView, Qlik Sense. And in this demo, we are using a multi-tier solution where we have QVDs that we're reading from, and ultimately on our left-hand side, we have the data sources. So for example, let's say we would like to understand where does the data come from in our sales application. We do a high-down related node, and we can instantly see how the data is connected and related. One important thing when doing impact analysis and data tracing like this is that it's not enough to have it on an aggregated high level. We need to have it on the lowest granularity. So in NodeGraph, we do it on the field level, meaning that all the way down to the lowest granularity. So let's say we would like to, if we open this application, we see that we have tables. If we open again, we see the different fields, meaning that we can actually follow one single field or column from a database all the way from the end user application, all the way back to the data source. And all of this is being connected in an automated way. Just going to show you like this. There you go. So now we know that ship date in our sales application are using 3 different fields from the QVDs in the transform step, using 2 different QVDs in the extract layer, and we are reading data from the SQL prod database and the table orders over here. Full transparency. And as I mentioned before, the BI tools are also very flexible in terms of calculating in the UI, meaning where the consumers are actually using this data. So if we turn on the content layer, we can now actually see what we have in the application. So if we look at this products application, the content layer, we can see that we have 3 different tabs. One called dashboard, we have one product cycle, we have one reports. If I open up dashboard, I can see the different types of objects that we have. Or for example, if we have extension objects. Just to give you an example why this is important. We have a customer, I think they have around 2,000 applications. One very important KPI for them, after starting using NodeGraph, they realized that they had 27 different ways of defining that KPIs. So in the different reports that they had 27 different ways of defining that KPIs, which is of course a huge problem if we are actually looking at different data, even though we believe it's the same data. So it's very important to have this traceability all the way to where the end users are actually consuming this data. So if I open up the bar chart here, I can see that we have an object called average unit price per product. And now we can actually see the dimensional expression and how we have actually calculated this expression and follow this data all the way back to the end, to the data source, like this. So when we get the question from the business saying, hey, this KPI, how do we calculate that? So if we don't have NodeGraph, we manually go in and first look at the definition in the expression, and then we continue trace this data through the different scripts that we have, and then we ultimately come to the SQL prod database. And probably before, we arrive to that conclusion, we have already changed the script to do something else. So this is a much quicker way of achieving that result. One important thing with governance is to make sure that we only use data that we have agreed on that we should use. The way NodeGraph highlights that is that NodeGraph will show everything using the same naming convention that you have had in your deployment framework and map that data in this view. If we are using something that are outside our framework, meaning that we are reading an Excel file from somewhere that we didn't know, or we are reading from a cloud system that we didn't know, NodeGraph will still capture that data connection, but place it on the files without rules. Meaning that here we can see that we actually use an Excel file, but it's outside of our framework. But we can still see where it's being used. On a feed level, we can understand where this data is where it ends up in our application. Meaning that this gives us the control of the BI environment, so we can feel comfortable in how the data is connected and how the data is traveling. So now we have looked at governance from a technical side, meaning that we will get control of how the data is connected, and we feel comfortable that everything around the data that we delivered is correct. But governance is also about the end user. We want to empower the end user and have end users that are curious to learn more around data. So what we have added into the data atlas is our data catalog, where based on the role that you have, you will be able to find different level of information or data in our catalog. So if you're an admin user, you will have access to every data that we have within our data landscape. It could be a column in the database, it could be a QVD, or it could be a master item or an expression in your ClickSense application. But this can also be used as a point of entry for end users. Let's say that today I would like to see what applications we have with something called sales. So I start typing in sales, and now I'm an administrator, so I get a lot of information. So either now we can filter this by manually filtering, or we can set this based on the role that is entering into the data catalog. Maybe that role should only be able to find KPIs. Maybe we'd like to do a KPI glossary, where we can find our most important KPIs, regardless of which BI tool they are in. Or maybe we should create a catalog for our applications. So now we can see that we have 3 different applications called sales. I jump into this sales application. And this is where we can actually start collaborating around our data. And we are releasing in March this year, we are releasing a new version of the data catalog where we have put even more power around the collaboration part, which I think shows the path that NodeGraph is on, where we really want to push this towards the end users. I know as of now this might be a bit technical view because I'm an administrator, but you can remove a lot of this noise around here and have a very clean picture and focus more on the collaboration around the data. You can add a business glossary. You can add the ratings around this. You can add data stewards that can also provide insights around your data. So if you see it more as a Netflix type of experience when consuming your data, that's where we are heading with this data catalog. All right. So that was our introduction demo. If you have any questions now around this, feel free to use the questions tab in the Livestorm platform to ask questions. Otherwise, I will just hand it over back to you, Kozalys, so you can jump in here.
Fantastic. Thank you, Oscar. This was very practical.
Thank you, Axel.
I love this interface when you click on an element and you see how the full lineage. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
There is a question here from one person who says there are so many links between the different layers. How easy is it to install NodeGraph?
Yes, so NodeGraph is, I mean, the installation process is super quick, right? Installation is 5 minutes, but then you have configuration. And that's something where you should work with a partner like Kozalys to do the configuration, because ultimately you want NodeGraph to be configured like to reflect the image of your Qlik environment, right? So that's something you would like to do, and depending on the size of your installation, it can vary from 2 hours to maybe 20 hours. But I think the important thing is when you bring in a tool like NodeGraph is that you don't only install it and then leave it. I mean, this opens up a possibility for new discussions around, you know, how should we work with the data? What is the process around, for example, with NodeGraph, you can see which data sources are used by certain users. What other reports should they use, and so on. So I think you should see NodeGraph as a platform for your governance work in general.
Okay. So you say that if I have an implementation which is not too difficult, too complex in the beginning, half a day would be a good time to make a first implementation.
Yes, definitely. From an implementation standpoint, yes. But then I really encourage to start the discussions together with you guys around, you know, this whole governance piece when it comes to data quality and things like that. But yes, in terms of hours, yes.
Okay. Another question that I see is that you mentioned and you showed the data catalog. Qlik also has in its data integration framework also a data catalog. How do you position these two solutions?
Yeah, and I think data catalog in general has been very popular, and I think it's difficult for the end users today to understand the differences around data catalog. If we take the specific now, Qlik data catalog and NodeGraph data catalog is two very different use cases. Qlik's data catalog is all about onboarding data that you would like to give to the self-service user. Let's say we take this data in this QVD we believe is very good. Let's bring that into the catalog, and then you can start consume it. Whereas we, based on the metadata, meaning the data around the data, we automatically populate the data catalog with every asset that you have, even though you don't know that you have that asset in your BI landscape. And then depending on role, we can give you access to it. So it's two very different use cases.
Okay. A question about security. If you have one environment which is shared by different departments, can you segment NodeGraph to make sure that everyone sees only his domain of data and visualization part?
Yeah, I think this is a very common approach in NodeGraph, is that maybe you would like to only, I mean, if I work with a project called finance, I should only be able to view the finance side of the data landscape. And maybe you have the administrator or operations. They should see everything, right? So in NodeGraph, we have something called container, which is a level where you can tell. So in this container, we should only have finance data. In this container, we should only have sales data. In this container, we should have everything. And then depending on and then you connect that to your Active Directory or something similar that you have. And based on that, NodeGraph will know which data you should see.
Okay. I presume that's a personal question. I presume that you have customers with test environment, production environment, pre-production environment. How do you manage all of these?
Yeah, so this is something that we argue quite a lot around the lunch table. Well, not anymore since everybody's working from home. So in our Teams meeting, but you can have two different approaches, right? You can actually use the containers that I mentioned before to have tests, pre-prod, and production. But that's, I would say, depending on the size of your BI landscape. The other approach to that would be to just run two different instances of NodeGraph, which I probably recommend. So you have one instance where you focus on production and one instance that you focus on pre-production. But again, I think that's a case by case, depending on the size of the BI landscape. And also, I know some of our customers are using the pre-production environment as a failover environment. And in those cases, you should definitely have two different instances because you want to have the whole failover secure.
Okay. One last question that I see is here is what is the typical size of a customer to start with NodeGraph?
As I mentioned before, I mean, if you just bought Qlik, you probably don't see the need for a platform like NodeGraph. That will occur after maybe 3 years or something like that, when you have realized, oh, we actually have a lot of data in our BI landscape. So I would say a typical customer of us has been using the BI tool for a few years, and now they have realized that, all right, we don't know what data we have in Qlik cells. We don't know where the data is coming from, or very typical scenarios also that they have been departmental, maybe a Qlik installation and a Power BI installation, and you have overlap, and you would like to understand where do we have the overlaps, and maybe we can save some money by don't calculate KPIs in two different BI tools, for example.
Okay. I think we've been over all the questions. I don't know, does anyone still have another question? Don't hesitate to go in the chat or in the question menu. I have a question. Does NodeGraph analyze the scripts of all the dashboards in order to generate the visuals, or should everything be configured somewhere else?
So NodeGraph uses two things, right, in order to understand your landscape. First of all, and the most important, we use the script log to understand what has happened to the data. But then we also use the metadata, for example, in the QVD header, for example. So what we do when you set up NodeGraph is that you point NodeGraph towards where you have your script log. So if you have Qlik view, it's on your file share or on the server somewhere. And in the Qlik sense is very much the same, but then they gather the script logs in one single place. So that's what you need basically. So it's very straightforward.
Okay. And the second part of the same question was, what is the effort in terms of time to maintain the configuration with the changes in the dashboards?
So all of this is being done in an automated way. So you do it once, and once you have done that, everything will automatically update. So what you do then is that once you have configured NodeGraph, you schedule NodeGraph to run through your environment. So either you do it on a daily basis or a weekly, hourly, depending on the scope, I would say. But typically, we schedule NodeGraph to run on a daily basis. And then it's automatically updated, everything.
So each time you have a new application, each time you have a change in an application, each time you make a new data model, it will it will automatically see it and show it on your screen.
Exactly, and I strongly believe that's the key for a successful governance work around your BI landscape.
Okay. Well, I think we've been over all the questions.
Yeah, very good questions.
Okay, so if there is no additional question, I think we can round up. And thank you for your presentation, Carl and Oscar. And I'm sure you are available for any question, but don't hesitate to contact Kozalys if you have any. Is in the chat also. Okay, it's someone who is saying thank you, and it was very interesting. Okay, thank you very much, and bye-bye to everyone. We will send you some the slides of the presentation. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thank you very much. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Pleasure.